The parable of the rich man and Lazarus, found in Luke chapter 16, is an example both of man who was a lover of money. Jesus was addressing the Pharisees and calling them lovers of money. And this parable demonstrated how the rich people foolishly made poor use of their possessions by not helping the needy. And also this parable is an example of the continued validity of the law and the prophets, because earlier on Jesus was telling the Pharisees, because you are so wealthy and you're so blinded by your wealth that you have forgotten about the law and the prophets. You are breaking the law. And so by this parable Jesus was validating the law and the prophets. Of course, the law and the prophets equals to the Old Testament. Now, there are three challenges when we look at this parable. Number one, who is Lazarus? Was he a real person? Because this is the only parable of Jesus that a name was ascribed to a person. In some ancient manuscripts, the rich man was called Dives, D-I-V-E-S. But Dives is just a Latin word for rich man. So it wasn't his name. It's just another language for a rich person. So in this parable, the rich man has no name, and that is quite telling. But Lazarus, the poor guy, he has a name, Lazarus. So who is Lazarus? Is it a real person that Jesus encountered and he used it in a story? Or did he just use that name for a certain purpose? Of course, this Lazarus is not the Lazarus that he raised from the dead earlier on, because that wasn't a poor person. The Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, they were quite well-to-do, a middle-class family who frequently hosted Jesus in their home and provided hospitality and food, etc. The second challenge is, does this parable tell us that rich people always end up in hell? The word that Jesus used for hell in this parable is the word Hades, which is the place that the dead would go to awaiting Judgment Day. But whatever it is hell, because in the end, in Revelation chapter 20, Hades will also be thrown into the lake of fire. So whether Hades is a holding area or the real hell whatsoever, it is still the same. So second challenge is, does this parable teach us that rich people always end up in hell and poor people in heaven? If this is true, then all of us will be in trouble, because none of us here is as poor as Lazarus. All of us are as rich as everybody else. So in that case, then all of us would finally end up in hell, and all the poor people, the homeless, the beggars outside, perhaps they will end up in heaven. Is that the case? Can we make a theology out of this? Now, incidentally, Jesus uses rich people in his story too. The father of the prodigal son, he's a rich man. There are bad rich people, as we can see in this example. There are also good rich people. So, second challenge. Third challenge is, does this parable tell us that there is hell and heaven? Obviously, heaven and hell are real places that exist. They are just in a different dimension that we are not able to enter into. There is already hell. There is already heaven. Now! Not in the future. Now! There's already hell and heaven. It's just that we are not able to get there yet. Eventually, we will, so to speak. But is this what hell and heaven is like? For example, the rich man, when he was in hell, he could see what is happening in heaven. He could talk to Abraham. He could feel the fire and the thirst. Right? He could communicate with Abraham and Lazarus in heaven. Is that what it's going to be like? Will the people in hell eventually be able to communicate with the rest of us who will be in heaven? Can they pick up their handphone and call me? Hello, Michael, how are you in heaven? Are you okay? Is that possible? Or is this just a story to show us something else? So these are some challenges as we look into the parable. So with this in mind, let's read from verse 19.
There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died, and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died, and was buried. And in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off, and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water, and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you a great chasm has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment. But Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them. And he said, No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. He said to him, If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead.
In the parables of Jesus, there's always contrast, and then there is always reversal, especially in the Gospel of Luke. I've divided this parable into 3 scenes, and scene 1 is the rich man first, and poor man, Lazarus, contrast in life. What happened to them while they were still alive? We are now alive, so whatever we do now, being alive, is going to influence the future and eternity for us. So a contrast in life. So let's look at the first 3 verses in this passage. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. And then in verse 20, at his gate, rich people like to live in gated community, right? I mean, in Singapore, maybe we don't need such gated community because security is okay. But in Indonesia, you need to have a gated community so that you can be safe within your own community. But this joker is not living in a gated community. His whole mansion is gated. Laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, and longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table. This phrase, very interesting, longing to eat. Remember, who else in one of the parables was longing to eat? The prodigal son. He was also longing to eat. So he was longing to eat because he has sunk so low in the pit of misery and indignity, etc. Likewise, Lazarus was in that perpetual state of misery and deprivation, and he was longing to eat. He was starving. He was longing to eat just like the prodigal son. Even the dogs came and licked his sores. So let's look at the rich man first. The rich man, the life of the rich man when he was still alive. Firstly, he was dressed, as we have read, in purple. Purple. In those days, the color purple was not an easy commodity to obtain. It was very expensive. The rich man was likely clothed in what they call Tyrian purple or royal purple. In other words, it's like the Prada, the Armani, the Gucci, the Versace, the top fashion design of the day. The color was extracted from the mucus of a rare sea snail. Very hard to come by, very expensive to produce, and very costly to buy. It's not just ordinary silkworm, this is from a rare sea snail. And Aristotle assigned a value to it of 10 to 20 times its weight in gold. It's royal purple. And this is a picture of the Emperor Nero in Tyrian purple, because, as you can see. so only the royalty, celebrity, rich people of those days can afford to wear Tyrian purple. Now remember who was clothed with a purple cape? Jesus. They mocked him by putting a purple robe, the song, the purple robe, on him. King of the Jews, you should be having a purple robe. And that's a real purple robe from the Romans. So this guy was rich beyond measure because he could afford to wear the best of fashions, the most expensive fashions that came out of Milan and Paris, etc. Then he was also dressed in fine linen. Now fine linen is, the word used in Greek for fine linen is bousos. It's a strong, rare thread secreted by muscles. This is fine linen. It's white, expensive underwear. Only royalties wore this very expensive cloth as undergarment. We also read that he lived in luxury every day. He ate the best foods, drank the best wine, and his house was the best mansion in town. In other words, he was someone to be envied. I googled some of the best food in Singapore. This is a picture of what is served in Sentosa. This is a Michelin 2-star chef by the name of Guy Martin, and this is the kind of food they produce. Another one that they serve is this, Michelin 2-star. Of course, in Singapore, there are a lot of Michelin star hawker center too. But we're not talking about those. We're talking about this luxurious food. Now we come to Lazarus. Lazarus, the name is Hebrew for El-Azar, which means he whom God helps. It's a very good name, but we don't hear people naming their son Lazarus, right? I don't know any Lazarus in my life. But it's a good name because it's Hebrew for El-Azar, he whom God helps. In other words, Jesus used this name for this poor man to show to his audience in the story that Lazarus is poor, but he's righteous and pious because he's somebody whom God helps. Of course, we can react and say, wow, what a joke, man. If Lazarus is he whom God helps, but God isn't helping him because he's still suffering every day. He's still begging. He's still hungry. He's still deprived. How did God help him? So it's like it's adding insult to injury. But of course, we only look at the present. We don't know what would happen to Lazarus in the afterlife, because in the afterlife, he lived up to his name, or God lived up to the name because God really helped him. So sometimes if God isn't helping us now, it doesn't mean that God is not doing anything. God has his plan. So Lazarus is a righteous, pious, but poor. Secondly, El-Azar is the same name as Abraham's servant Eliezer. Immediately, the Jewish listeners would identify, they would understand the humor that Jesus was applying. Oh, this guy was named after Abraham's servant, because later on in the story, Abraham was introduced. He was carried to Abraham's bosom, Abraham's side. And thirdly, Jesus could be alluding to the other Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, that he raised from the dead. Later on, Abraham said, well, if I sent Lazarus back from the dead to your brothers, they would not even repent. In other words, resurrection of Lazarus failed to convert the Jewish leaders at the time. Actually, when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, it was the clincher for the Pharisees and the religious leaders to begin plotting his death. That was the tipping point for them. And so he was perhaps alluding to that by naming the poor man Lazarus. So there's no actual Lazarus in that story. It is a story. The two characters are fictional, the rich man and Lazarus. But he gave the poor man that name as a way of expressing all this. Now, Lazarus was laid in front of the gate, and the Greek word is balo. Actually, this word means he was literally thrown out with force. It could be that he was thrown out by the rich man's servants. Don't disturb us, get out. You are a nuisance. Or he could be thrown at that place by his friends. Now, if your friends throw you, what kind of friends are they? In other words, they're not really good friends. They just try to get rid of you. So we can surmise in this story, the way we interpret it is Lazarus had really no friends. Even his friends were nasty to him, brutal and harsh. They just throw him at the gate, hoping that the rich man would take care of him and provide some food for him. So he had been flung roughly, and it seems that he was just left there to lie there. Now, secondly, this gate, what gate? It's not the front gate, because you never get food from the front gate, unless it's Chinese New Year. Then you go visiting, bring your offering through the front gate, etc. This is the rear gate, the real entrance of the mansion where rubbish is dumped, leftover food, etc., and where all the dogs congregated. And by the way, in those days in the Middle East, these are not the kind of dogs we have today. They don't have dogs as pets, the toy dogs, the poodle, etc. These are wild dogs, rough and mangy and having sores themselves. They are wild dogs. He was very ill because in the story, Jesus painted that he was having a lot of sores, full of ulcers. He was too ill to go anywhere. Probably he got no money to buy medicine. So he just relied on the dogs to come and lick his sores. Of course, the dogs, you must remember, the dogs, when they came to lick his sores, it was not because they liked him. It's because the dogs were also looking for nourishment. And sometimes licking sores can be a form of nourishment. It's like eating maggots when you don't have anything else to eat. So they were wild dogs. Not because they pitied Lazarus, but because there was an opportunity to get some vitamin from his sores, from his ulcers, etc. So the contrast, poor and rich. What a contrast. What a wide divide. Sometimes we find this is true even today. For example, in Indonesia or in other countries where you have a big mansion, and then outside the big mansion you have the slum and all the homeless people. So it is still evident today in our today's world. But here Jesus is telling us this story, painting this big gap between the rich man and the poor man. Of course, the lesson is the rich man is someone who could have done something for the poor man. And even though Lazarus was at his gate daily, he never did anything. Okay, we come to scene 2, which is a great reversal, because poor man first and then rich man. The reversal in the afterlife. Now, verse 22 says, the time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. It's a very beautiful verse, even though it's about death. So, what can we learn even from this verse? Firstly, we are not told anything happened for Lazarus at his death. There was no fanfare, there was no farewell, there was no funeral, there was no burial. He just died. There could be a few speculation. Number one, he died and the dogs ate him up. Free food, why not? Or he could have been buried in a mass grave for poor people. Whatever. So no funeral, not even a burial was held in his honor. So it is likely that if no one cared for him while he was alive, his death was no different. Yet he was carried by angels to Abraham's side. Of course, we know this expression, Abraham's bosom. Only 2 other characters in the Bible were carried by angels after they died. Moses and Elijah. So Lazarus, in the story of Jesus, had the distinct privilege of being the 3rd one to be carried by angels to Abraham's bosom. And I'm looking forward to the day I die, I expect God to send his angels to come and carry me to his bosom. After all, my name is one. Michael, you better carry the archangel. In any case, when we die, we'll be with God instantly. Abraham's bosom is the image of intimacy. You know, Abraham is the father of our faith. Abraham is the perfect original believer. He's the first one who believed in God. He's the perfect original Christian. And he loved God so much that he was willing to sacrifice his only son for God. Abraham, the friend of God, God considered him a friend, the lover of God. There's nobody who is more perfect and more original in faith than Abraham was. So Abraham signified where God is, the presence of God. So he's in the bosom of Abraham. It speaks about Lazarus, the character Lazarus, now enjoying the intimacy, security of God himself. And of course, this is also, if you lie in the bosom of your host in a banquet, is like the Apostle John, the beloved disciple, who was always leaning on the bosom, the side of Jesus. This about proximity is like a banquet. So in other words, in this parable, Jesus was drawing us a picture of the messianic banquet, the ultimate feast in heaven. This is the epitaph that Peter Chow wanted on his tombstone. Gone to the ultimate feast. So this is a picture of Lazarus now feasting at the messianic banquet when we will have all our needs fulfilled, so to speak, and enjoying the abundant riches of God in heaven. Rich man also died. The rich man died later, right? Lazarus died first. And apparently he didn't notice that Lazarus was dead and gone. So he continued to live life the way he did, enjoying himself self-indulgent. Except now there was no Lazarus to bother him if he went out of the mansion. So he also died and was buried. And then all these things happened in hell. While he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away. Now, we cannot take this parable to teach us facts about hell and heaven. In other words, we cannot say, well, he looked up, that means hell is below. Then you have to look up to heaven. No such thing. Hell is not below. Heaven is not above. The heavens, we know, they're called skies. So heaven and hell, they are not below and above. They are somewhere. And so he called to him, Father Abraham. Now, it seems that they can communicate, but in reality, they cannot. People in heaven and hell cannot be communicating. Right? Father, have mercy, etc. on this. So, what can we say about the rich man? Number one, we are specifically told that he was buried, probably with a lavish ceremony and public mourning. No doubt he was quite surprised to find himself in Hades. I think the rich man expects to find himself in heaven so that he can continue his lifestyle of feasting every day. Now, the minute he died, he became a pauper. And this is true of life. You may be the richest person on earth, but the minute you die, you cannot write a check anymore. You cannot transfer money. Now, I want you to notice that in the parable, in the afterlife, he was no longer called the rich man. He was described by the impersonal pronoun. He spoke to Abraham. He said this. He was no longer the rich man because he was really the pauper, the poor man in heaven. So, what is important is not the farewell from this life, but the welcome on the other side. Now we come to the last scene, which is poor rich man and Abraham. And I call this the art of the deal. The first deal is this. In hell, and he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham, etc. And he called out, Father Abraham, have pity and send Lazarus. We realize from here that he never ever repented. There was no sign of repentance. He was just sorry for his miserable state. He was in lament, torment, and he was in agony in the fire. He's instructing Abraham to send Lazarus to bring water. Amazing. He's still wanting to instruct someone And here he's instructing Abraham, of all people, to send Lazarus, because to him Lazarus, it was still that good for nothing, fit just for a slave person. He said, Father Abraham, send Lazarus. So he called Lazarus by name. In other words, he gave himself away. Obviously, he knew Lazarus by sight and by plight. So he's still a proud rich person, thinking that money can buy everything, including people. So this is the danger of having too much wealth and power. You think you can buy everything. Everything can be bought, even people. Now, this is Abraham's reply. He said, son, child. It's a gentle term. I mean, Abraham wasn't harsh to the rich man. He said, son. In other words, this is like Jesus. He was gentle to the Pharisees. He was gentle to all his enemies. He was giving them a chance. In fact, this is his grace. He was telling them this parable is for them. And he's calling them child, son. A term of endearment, a gentle term. And this is how Jesus treated everybody else, even those who were opposing him. And then Abraham said, well, remember, in your lifetime you enjoyed everything, and Lazarus suffered. Now it's reversed. And besides all this, between us there is a great chasm. So, three things here. Help is unavailable, and you cannot be asking for mercy because you did not show mercy to Lazarus. Now there is a great chasm. There are actually two great divides, my friend. The first great divide is between heaven and hell. The other great divide is between afterlife and life. The living and the dead. Once you are in one place, it is fixed. It is irrevocable judgment. I mean, this can scare the hell out of people to become Christians, because really, after that, there is no more chance. No more chance. No, don't even have a chance of annihilation. That means total, nothingness. No, you are either here or there, and it is done. The great chasm. Maybe that's why Billy Graham and all the evangelists of the world, we're so passionate to preach the gospel, because that would be what it is after we are dead and gone. Now, deal number 2, he said, if you cannot send Lazarus to help me cool down my agony, perhaps you can send him to my father's house, because I have 5 brothers. By the way, 5 brothers is just a round number that Jesus used. And this is a story, it's not real. But 5 is a round number for convenience sake. Let him warn them. So we find that he continues to hustle by begging. Firstly, he tried to bully and give instruction. That didn't work, so he resorted to the art of the deal. Beg. Let's compromise. My life depends on this. Please, 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 please. But it is just for his own agenda. There's no sincerity. And he continues to treat Lazarus badly. Send Lazarus. Send a guy to do my errand. He still behaves like an arrogant rich guy. Deal number 2 also didn't work, right? Because Abraham said, they have Moses and the prophets. They have the Old Testament. Enough. But why deal number 2? Why did he suddenly think of his brothers? For once in his life, in hell, he started to think of others. When on earth, he thought only of himself, never of others. Why? Maybe because he realized he had set a bad example. And now in hell, he remembered that his brothers were also living according to his example. The same lifestyle he had, the same attitude he had. Thirdly, the one thing that can add agony to him in hell is to be shut up forever with his brothers in crime. Because in hell, my brothers will be cursing me for all eternity. So he is just thinking of himself as well. Abraham said, they have Moses, the law, and the prophets, i.e. the Old Testament. Let them listen to them. The word listen means to heed. Not just hear, but to heed, to obey. And if they did, they would have repented too. But obviously they listened, they read, they went to synagogue, they had some religious upbringing, but they never ever obeyed the word of God. Deal number 3, the last one. No, Father Abraham, he's starting to argue. But if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent. Sometimes we believe that if my unbelieving relatives and parents, if they can see someone raised from the dead, they might become Christians. Right? We still think that way too, that a miracle or some kind of resurrection appearances will convince people to become Christians. What do we find here? He continues to hustle by arguing. So, firstly, he gives instruction, he bullies. That doesn't work, he will plead. And if that doesn't work, he will argue. So, he still wants to argue his case, argue his way out. He still wants to close the deal. And this time he's asking for a miracle. The supernatural appearance of Lazarus, still the same thing, still using Lazarus for his own means. No remorse or sorry compassion for Lazarus. And he's trying to manipulate Abraham, knowing that there is no way Lazarus would want to go back to earth. Why should Lazarus want to go back to earth after all that he had been through? So, Abraham's final answer is this. The Old Testament is all the witness they need. If they do not believe God's words, they will not believe even if one should return from the dead. And we know that for sure because even though Jesus resurrected and was raised from the dead, the Jewish nation did not believe him, did not even trust in him. And they try all kinds of ways to discredit the resurrection. This is from the theologian Howard Marshall. Miracles will not convince morally blind and unrepentant hearts. So it is really amazing that we have come to faith, to believe in something that is so awesome, like the resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. What you do now counts for all eternity. Share one thing you can start doing to prepare for eternity. And with this, I go to my implications. Number one implication is this. The time to seek the Lord is here and now, and not there and then. Sometimes we have this thinking, I will seek the Lord once I've made my first bundle, once I have succeeded in life, once I've gotten married, once I've security. So I will seek the Lord, then I will have time. Don't kid yourself. You will not have time to seek the Lord there and then when you are not seeking the Lord here and now. Remember Zacchaeus, after his conversion, he said, Lord, here and now I will give away my wealth. The key is here and now. Christianity, our faith, our discipleship, our devotion, our obedience to God is always here and now, not ever there and then. So Isaiah chapter 55 verse 6, seek the Lord while he may be found. Maybe one day you can't find him anymore. Call on him while he is near. Don't wait until he's so far away. What do we mean by seek the Lord? Let me just share with you. Seeking the Lord means seeking his presence. We want his presence to be with us. We want his presence to be in our life. And presence is a common translation of the Hebrew word face. In other words, we are to seek his face. We want his face to shine upon us. We want his favor because when he looks at us, when his face is shining upon us, we have his favor. Another verse in 1 Chronicles chapter 22 verse 19. Now set your mind and heart to seek the Lord your God. So here we see two ways we can seek the Lord. The mind's attention and the heart's affection. We think of God, we give him attention in our mind, and then we love him with our emotion. In the end, the promise to those who seek the Lord is that he will be found. He's not playing hide and seek. Second implication, there are consequences to our actions that are not always felt on earth, but follow us into eternity. Russell Crowe, as the character Maximus Decimus Meridius, he said this, what we do in life echoes in eternity. There are all three stages. Firstly, there is life. When we die, there is life after life. The soul will go on. The soul is something that has a beginning. When you are born, you have a soul. But the soul is something that will not die. So the soul has a beginning, but the soul has no end. the soul is eternal. So there is life after life, which is transitional heaven. Now we don't know this theology here. We've got no time for theology at this moment. But when we die, we will be with God. It will be like a holding area. Whether you are conscious or not, maybe you are asleep, whatever, but you are there. It's called the transitional heaven, because the real heaven is what? Is eternal earth and heaven. In the book of Revelation, when God will create everything new, then we will have the eternal heaven and earth. That will be life after life after life. So it's all about life, actually. There's nothing about death here. In the eyes of God, there is no such thing as death, because Jesus has already conquered the last enemy, which is death. There is no longer death. For us, when we die, which we must, we don't die. We go to life after life. And that eventually will be going to life after life after life. There are only three things that will last for eternity. The Trinity, God Himself. In other words, we have to follow Jesus. The Word of God will last for eternity. In other words, we should obey Jesus. People, you and I, our friends, our loved ones, they will last for eternity, either hell or heaven. Therefore, we need to love others by sharing with them the gospel. Rick Warren said this: love leaves legacy. How you treated other people, not your wealth or accomplishments, is the most enduring impact you can leave on earth. Third implication: we can influence others more than we realize. Whatever we do on earth to other people, we actually influence them. And sometimes we influence them more than we ever realize. There is no such thing that this is small matter that we do for each other. And this is from Leighton Ford's book, The Christian Persuader. If a man has a soul, and he has, and if the soul can be saved or lost for all eternity, and it can, then the most important thing is to tell him how to be saved. And this is the kind of influence we want to exert on others by sharing with them the gospel, because that would be the best thing we can do for somebody else. Fourth implication: God's word is the most important evidence to prepare us for life eternal. That's why Abraham said to the rich man, your brothers, they already have the Bible, the OT at home. They have enough. It's sufficient. If they heed, if they listen, if they obey, if they follow. So God's word is the most important evidence to prepare us for life eternal. And here is something about that. The Bible is basic instructions before life eternal. By the way, only basic instructions. Some of us find it very hard to study the Bible but it's only basic instructions, enough to get you into heaven. After that, there's much more. Because John said, if everything is to be written about Christ, there is not enough libraries on earth to hold all the writings. So there's much more. So today, when you go back, please take out your dusty old Bible and start to caress it. Huh? And the last one before we close is this. No matter what our economic position in this world, if we don't have Christ, we don't have life. Going back to the parable, the rich man, he had everything, but he did not have Christ, so to speak. Lazarus had nothing, but he had Christ. But conversely, it's also true. The poor person, if he does not have Christ, he will also have nothing at all for all time. So it doesn't matter whether you are rich or poor, whatever, smart or not so smart. If you don't have Christ, you don't have life. And this is a very interesting quote by Warren Wiersbe, one of my favorite preachers. He said this: material wealth is either a window through which we see God. In other words, material wealth is okay, no problem. There are a lot of rich people who are grateful, spiritual, holy, devoted. Or a mirror in which we see ourselves. Oh, how grand I am, how great, how lucky, how fortunate. And why should I pity all these poor people? After all, some of them will be like that. You see, material wealth is either a window through which we see God or a mirror in which we see ourselves. So, remember my last implication, whatever position you are in life, if you don't have Christ, you don't have life. Because 1 John 5:12 tells us, whoever has the Son has life. Whoever does not have the Son of God does not have life. Thank you, God bless, and see you again.